I know what everyone thinks, that sleeping with my boyfriend's brother was calculated cruelty, unforgivable, the kind of thing only a monster would do. And maybe I am a monster, but not for the reasons they believe. The thing is, Mark's actually missing now. Like vanished without a trace, missing. And somehow, in the twisted logic of grief and blame, his family has convinced themselves that I deserve this guilt, that I deserve to wonder if my revenge is what pushed him over the edge. But the weight crushing my chest isn't guilt over the revenge itself, it's the knowledge that everyone's mourning the wrong person. They're searching for someone who doesn't deserve to be found. I'm going to tell you everything that happened, exactly how it unfolded. Not because I want absolution, I passed that exit ramp weeks ago, but because someone needs to understand what really drove me to Adam's bed that night, and why Mark's disappearance might be the only piece of justice I'll ever get. Because the darkest truth isn't what I did, it's what I still haven't told anyone about what Mark did first. 6 months ago I thought I'd found my person. That's how stupidly optimistic I was back then. Mark Rodriguez swept into my life at my best friend's engagement party, all charm and confidence wrapped in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent. He was a financial advisor, successful, the kind of guy who made reservations at restaurants I'd only read about online. At 26, I was still bartending part-time while trying to make it as a freelance graphic designer, living in a shoebox apartment with mismatched furniture. Mark felt like proof that I was finally getting my life together. "You're different," he told me on our third date, reaching across the candlelit table to take my hand. "Most women I meet just want the lifestyle. You actually have dreams." I practically glowed. Here was someone who saw past the uncertainty, who made me feel like my struggling artist phase was charming instead of pathetic. He started staying over 3 nights a week, leaving expensive wine in my fridge, talking about trips we'd take to Barcelona and Costa Rica. His family loved me immediately, or so I thought. His mother, Patricia, hugged me tight the first time we met and whispered, "Finally someone real." But there were small things looking back. The way Mark would scroll through his phone during my stories about work. How he'd change my Spotify playlist in the car without asking, like my music was just background noise to be optimized. The time he laughed when I got excited about landing a small client, saying, "That's adorable." Not mean, exactly. Just dismissive enough to make me question whether I was being too sensitive. I pushed those moments down, plastered over them with his grand gestures and the way he looked at me in public like I was his prize. I even started dressing differently, buying clothes I couldn't afford because I wanted to fit into his world. The shift was so gradual I didn't notice I was erasing myself. Then I met Adam at Mark's family birthday dinner 3 months in. His younger brother, fresh off a breakup, quiet where Mark was loud, thoughtful where Mark was certain. He was a high school teacher, wore jeans and a simple button-down, and when he asked about my work he actually listened. Like maintained eye contact, asked follow-up questions, remembered details. It was jarring enough that I felt guilty afterward, like I cheated just by enjoying a conversation. "Adam always gets weird around my girlfriends," Mark mentioned on the drive home, his hand possessive on my thigh. "Jealousy thing. He's never been able to keep a woman interested long-term." The contempt in his voice made me uncomfortable, but I filed it away with all the other small discomforts. I started noticing how Mark talked about everyone in his life. His assistant was not the sharpest knife. His best friend was going nowhere fast. Even his mother was dramatic when she got emotional. There was always this edge, this need to position himself above. But he was never like that with me, I told myself. I was special. I was different. What I didn't realize was that I hadn't yet disappointed him. The first crack appeared 4 months into our relationship. I was working on a pitch for a potential major client, a rebrand for a local restaurant chain that could actually pay my bills for months. I'd been up until 3 in the morning perfecting the presentation, and I was buzzing with nervous energy when Mark came over that evening. "How'd it go?" he asked, barely looking up from his laptop. "I think really well." They seemed engaged, asked tons of questions, wanted to see. "That's great, babe," he interrupted. "Hey, can you be quiet for like 20 minutes? I've got this call with Tokyo in 10 and I need to prep." I deflated instantly, took my excitement to the bedroom, and scrolled through Instagram instead. When he finally finished, an hour later, he didn't ask about the pitch again. The client ended up going with another designer, and when I told Mark, crying from the rejection, he sighed and said, "Well, you'll get the next one. What do you want for dinner?" That's when I started seeing it everywhere, how my wins were dismissed and my losses were expected. How he'd give me advice I didn't ask for, explaining my own industry to me like I was a child playing pretend. How he'd invite me to events with his colleagues, and then ignore me all night, leaving me to make awkward small talk with wives and girlfriends who clearly had more practice being decorative. But I stayed, because leaving felt like admitting I'd wasted months on someone who didn't value me, and because part of me still believed I was overreacting. Maybe this was just what adult relationships looked like. Maybe I was too sensitive, too needy, too idealistic about what partnership meant. I should have trusted my gut. I should have walked away when I first felt myself shrinking. Instead, I did what so many of us do. I doubled down, tried harder, convinced myself that if I could just be better, cooler, less demanding, everything would click into place. I even started therapy, hoping my therapist would give me tools to communicate better with Mark. Instead, she kept asking questions like, "Do you feel seen in this relationship? And what happens when you express a need?" Questions I dodged because I wasn't ready for the answers. Then came the night that changed everything, though I wouldn't understand how much until later. We were at Mark's apartment, the sleek downtown loft that screamed success, and I made the mistake of asking if he'd looked at the portfolio pieces I'd sent him earlier that week. I'd been working on a passion project, a series of designs exploring cultural identity, and I genuinely wanted his feedback. "Oh yeah, I glanced at them," he said, not looking away from the basketball game on his massive TV. "They're nice. Just nice. What do you want me to say, Taylor? They're good, you're talented. But like, is this the stuff that's going to pay your bills? Maybe focus more on what clients actually want instead of these artsy projects." Something in his tone, that particular blend of condescension and boredom, snapped something in me. "You know what, Mark? Sometimes it feels like you don't actually respect what I do." He finally looked at me, eyebrows raised. "That's dramatic. I'm just being realistic. Someone has to be. Realistic, or you just don't think my work matters." Jesus Christ, Taylor, where is this coming from? He muted the TV, and suddenly I had his full attention, which somehow felt worse. "I've been nothing but supportive. I've introduced you to people, I've tried to give you advice, and this is the thanks I get. You picking a fight because I'm not fawning over your hobby projects." Hobby projects. The words landed like a slap. "This isn't a hobby, this is my career." "Okay," he said slowly, like he was explaining something to a difficult child. "But you're 26 and still bartending. At some point, don't you think it's time to grow up a little, get serious about stability?" I felt my face flush hot. "I am serious, I'm building something." "Just because it doesn't look like your path?" "My path has a 401k and health insurance," he cut in. "I'm not trying to be a dick, I'm trying to help you see reality. You're incredibly talented, but talent isn't enough. You need to be strategic." The worst part was how reasonable he sounded. How he'd taken my vulnerability and twisted it into proof of my immaturity. I apologized, actually apologized for overreacting, and let him pull me onto the couch, where he kissed my forehead and went back to his game like we'd resolved something instead of just confirming my suspicion that he saw me as a project, not a partner. I cried in my car on the way home and told myself I was being hormonal. 3 days later, Adam texted me. Just a simple message: "Hey, I came across this design competition and thought of you," with a link to a prestigious international award for emerging artists. The prize was $50,000 in a featured exhibition. It was such a small thing, but it cracked me open. Here was someone who'd had one real conversation with me and remembered what mattered. I thanked him, told him I'd definitely apply, and we fell into an easy text exchange about art and teaching and nothing particularly deep. But it felt deep because someone was actually asking questions and waiting for answers. I didn't tell Mark about the texts. Not because they were inappropriate, they weren't, but because I knew he'd either dismiss them or get territorial in that casual, belittling way he had. Besides, Adam was just being friendly. He was Mark's brother. It didn't mean anything. Except I started looking forward to those messages more than Mark's phone calls. I started saving up funny stories to tell Adam instead of Mark, because Adam would laugh instead of explaining why something wasn't actually funny. And that's when I should have recognized I was in dangerous territory, not because anything had happened, but because I was already comparing, already seeking elsewhere what my relationship wasn't giving me. The irony is, if Mark had just been a normal level of bad boyfriend, I probably would have eventually broken up with him and moved on. Maybe Adam and I would have connected months later after appropriate time had passed, and it would have been sweet instead of destructive. But Mark wasn't a normal level of bad, and I was about to find out exactly how not normal he was. It happened on a random Thursday in June. Mark had a key to my place, would sometimes let himself in if he got off work early. I was at my bartending shift, not expecting him, when my phone started blowing up with texts from my neighbor. "Someone's in your apartment. I called the cops but wanted to let you know." "Never mind, it's your boyfriend, he showed me his key." I called Mark immediately, heart hammering. "Why are you at my place?" "Relax, I was just dropping off that book I mentioned." His voice was casual, unbothered. "Your neighbor's paranoid as hell." Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I finished my shift and came home to find the book on my counter and everything seemingly normal. Except my laptop was closed when I'd left it open. In my desk drawer where I kept personal documents, old journals, random papers, wasn't quite shut all the way. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake it. 2 days later, at dinner with Mark and some of his work friends, one of the wives asked me about my design work. Before I could answer, Mark jumped in. "Taylor's really talented, but she's still figuring out the business side." She actually told me last month she's been thinking about giving up the design thing and going back to school for something more stable, maybe marketing or something practical. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I had never said that, not once, not even close. That's not, I started, but Mark squeezed my knee under the table hard enough to hurt. Don't be modest, babe, it's smart to have a backup plan. The whole table nodded sympathetically, and I sat there stunned into silence while Mark controlled the narrative of my own life. When I confronted him later, he acted confused. I thought that's what you meant when you were talking about financial stress. I was trying to make you sound thoughtful, not flaky. But I never said I was quitting design. Jesus, Taylor, I was making conversation. Why are you so sensitive about everything lately? That night, I went through my laptop with increasing dread. My journal app I'd started keeping notes there instead of paper showed last access 2 days ago. Thursday, when Mark had been in my apartment alone. He'd read my journal, my private thoughts about our relationship, about feeling dismissed and small, about wondering if I was settling, about noticing Adam, though I'd written nothing inappropriate, just observations about how different the brothers were. I felt violated in a way I couldn't fully articulate. But I also felt crazy because what proof did I have? He could easily deny it, make me feel paranoid again. So I tested him. I wrote a fake entry about a design client who didn't exist, giving it a specific name and pretending I was stressed about their unreasonable demands. Then I waited. 4 days later at Mark's family Sunday dinner, he casually asked how things were going with that difficult client. What was the name? Henderson Associates? Henderson Associates. The fake client from my fake journal entry. My blood went cold. Fine, I managed. All sorted out. See, I told you it would work itself out, he said, smiling, completely unaware he just exposed himself. I made it through dinner on autopilot. Adam caught my eye across the table at one point, his expression concerned, but I looked away quickly. I couldn't deal with kindness right then. I was too busy trying not to shatter. That night I confronted Mark. Really confronted him with the evidence laid out. He denied it at first, then minimized it. I was just trying to understand you better. Then got angry. You're really going to make me the bad guy for caring about what's going on in your head? And finally landed on the version that made me the problem. If you can't even talk to me about this stuff directly, what does that say about our relationship? Maybe I wouldn't have to read your journal if you actually opened up to me. The gaslighting was so perfect, so complete that for a moment I actually questioned myself. Had I been withholding? Was I the one creating distance? Then he played his final card. Look, I know I screwed up. I shouldn't have invaded your privacy. But Taylor, I did it because I'm worried about you. You've been pulling away, spending all this time in your head, and I thought maybe you'd written something that would help me understand how to be a better boyfriend. I love you. I just want us to work. And like an absolute idiot, I believed him. Or I wanted to believe him, which amounted to the same thing. We made up. He promised to never violate my privacy again. I promised to communicate better. We had make-up sex that felt more like sealing a contract than actual intimacy. I told myself this was the breakthrough we needed, that now things would get better. But I changed my laptop password, and I started noticing other things. How Mark would subtly put down his brother at every opportunity. How he'd steer me away from conversations with Adam at family gatherings, always with a possessive hand on my lower back. How he'd check my phone when he thought I wasn't looking, even though he'd promised to stop the surveillance. The relationship became a performance I was too exhausted to quit. I'd invested 7 months by this point. His family loved me. We talked vaguely about moving in together. Breaking up would mean admitting I'd ignored every red flag, that I'd let someone systematically diminish me while I smiled and said thank you. Then came the 4th of July party at Mark's parents' lake house. The day everything imploded. Everyone was there, the whole Rodriguez clan, family, friends, colleagues. Mark was in his element, playing the successful son, the guy who had it all figured out. I was wearing a dress he'd bought me, one that was way too formal for a lakeside barbecue but that he'd insisted made me look classy. I felt like a mannequin. Adam was there too, helping his dad with the grill, making his mother laugh, being effortlessly warm with everyone. I caught myself watching him more than once, and each time felt like a small betrayal, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong. Mark got progressively drunk as the day wore on, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how his affection turned aggressive, grabbing me roughly, making loud comments about my body, treating me like a prop in his performance of having the perfect life. Babe, get me another beer, he'd say, not ask. Or Taylor, tell everyone about that thing I was saying, without explaining what thing. I felt myself shrinking, trying to take up less space, be less noticeable. Adam saw it. I know he did, because our eyes met across the patio and his expression was pure concern. Around 9 p.m., I escaped to the bathroom inside the house, needing a break from playing my role. I was standing at the sink, staring at my reflection and barely recognizing myself when I heard Mark's voice from the deck just outside the open window. Yeah, she's great, but honestly. His words were slurred, cocky. I'm already kind of bored. She's hot, don't get me wrong, but the whole struggling artist thing gets old. Like, how long am I supposed to pretend her little design projects matter? Someone laughed, his friend Derek. So why not just cut her loose? Because she's perfect for right now. Looks good, isn't demanding, and she's so grateful for everything I do, it's easy. I'll ride it out for a while, see if she gets her shit together. If not, there's always someone else. The words hit me like ice water, not because I was shocked part of me had known, but because hearing it stated so plainly, so casually, confirmed that I'd been right to feel crazy. I wasn't imagining his disrespect. I wasn't being too sensitive. I was being used. I stood there frozen as they kept talking. Mark went on about how I was low maintenance and not like those career women who want everything. How I was a good time but probably not wife material because I didn't have my finances together. How he was helping me by staying with me, giving me exposure to a better lifestyle. I wanted to throw up, or scream, or both. Instead, I walked back outside with a smile plastered on my face. Mark pulled me onto his lap, kissing my neck sloppily, and I let him, already plotting my exit not just from the party but from the entire relationship. You okay? Adam appeared with a glass of water, offering it to me with those concerned eyes. Fine, I lied, taking the water, just overheated. Mark waved his brother off dismissively. She's good, man, I got her. But he didn't have me, not anymore. Around 11, people started heading out. Mark was too drunk to drive, which wasn't unusual. His plan was always to crash in his old room. But this time I told him I was going home. Stay, he whined, pulling at my hand. We'll have fun. I have work early tomorrow, I said, the lie smooth as silk. I'll Uber. He was too drunk to argue much, just made me promise to text when I got home. I promised, knowing I wouldn't. I ordered the Uber and stood in the driveway waiting, feeling like my skin was too tight for my body. I was vibrating with rage and humiliation and something else I couldn't name. Taylor? Adam's voice behind me made me jump. You sure you're okay? And that's when I broke. Not dramatically, I didn't cry or scream. I just turned to him and said quietly, your brother doesn't respect me at all, and I don't know why I stayed as long as I did. Adam's jaw tight. I know. You know. I've watched him do this before, different girls, same pattern. He gets off on the power trip. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I've called him on it, but he just laughs it off, says I'm jealous. He told me you get weird around his girlfriends. Yeah, because I watch him treat them like shit and it makes me crazy that they don't see it. He looked at me directly. But you see it now, right? The Uber pulled up. I should have gotten in. Should have gone home, processed everything, made a clean break. Instead, I heard myself say, do you want to get coffee or something? I don't want to go home yet. Adam hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then he canceled my Uber and said, let me grab my keys. We ended up at a 24-hour diner, one of those fluorescent-lit places that exist outside of normal time. We talked for 3 hours straight about Mark, about the relationship, about everything I'd been swallowing for months. Adam didn't offer solutions or try to fix me. He just listened and occasionally said, that's fucked up, or you deserved better than that. It was the most seen I'd felt in months. I heard him tonight, I finally admitted, talking to his friend about how I'm basically just convenient, how he's bored but I'm easy to keep around. Adam's expression darkened. He said that, verbatim. Jesus, Taylor, I'm sorry. He's my brother and I love him, but sometimes I really don't like him. We laughed, dark and exhausted. Then Adam said, what are you going to do? Break up with him, obviously. I just needed tonight to get my head straight first. Good, you deserve someone who sees how incredible you are. The way he said it, simple, matter of fact, like it was obvious, made something crack open in my chest. And suddenly the diner felt too small, too bright, too charged with everything we weren't saying. I should get you home, Adam said, but he didn't move. Neither did I. The drive back to my place was quiet, loaded with tension I told myself was just the emotional exhaustion of the night. When Adam pulled up outside my building, I should have said thank you and good night, should have gone inside alone. Do you want to come up? The words were out before I could stop them. Just for a bit, I don't want to be alone yet. I watched him war with himself, saw the exact moment he made the decision he knew was wrong. Yeah, okay, for a bit. We sat on my couch, respectable distance between us, talking about safer topics, his teaching job, my design work, anything but Mark. But Mark was there anyway, in the space between us and the wrongness of this intimacy. I should go, Adam said finally, but he didn't stand up. Adam, I started, not knowing how to finish. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw everything in his expression, the traction he'd been suppressing, the guilt, the desire, the knowledge that this was a terrible idea. I kissed him first, closed the distance between us and pressed my mouth to his, and for a second he froze. Then he was kissing me back, his hands in my hair, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. We made it to my bedroom. I won't give you the details because they're not the point. But I will tell you this, I wasn't thinking about love or connection or even genuine desire. I was thinking about revenge. About how Mark had made me feel worthless and how sleeping with his brother would make him feel something for once, would hurt him the way he'd hurt me. It was calculated, it was cruel, it was exactly as bad as everyone now thinks it was. Afterward we lay in the dark, not touching, both of us realizing what we'd done. Oh God, Adam whispered, what did we just do? I don't know, but I did know, I knew exactly what I'd done and why. I should tell him, right? I should tell Mark before he finds out some other way. No, I said quickly. I'll tell him when I break up with him, I'll tell him everything. Adam left around 4 in the morning and I didn't sleep at all. I just lay there feeling the sick satisfaction of having a weapon now. Mark had humiliated me with his words. I would destroy him with mine. I broke up with Mark the next day over coffee in a public place where he couldn't make a scene. I told him I'd overheard his conversation at the party, that I was done being his easy, low-maintenance placeholder. He tried to backtrack, said he was drunk, didn't mean it would do better. When that didn't work, he got angry, called me ungrateful, reminded me of everything he'd done for me, suggested I'd never find anyone better. And that's when I told him about Adam. The color drained from his face. What? Last night, after the party, we slept together. I expected rage. Shouting something explosive. Instead, Mark went very, very quiet. Then he stood up, said we're done, and walked out. I felt victorious for approximately 6 hours. Then the reality of what I'd done started to sink in. Adam called me that afternoon, his voice shaking. Mark knows. He showed up at my apartment, completely lost it. Taylor, he's not okay, like really not okay. That's not my problem anymore. He's my brother, and yeah, he's an asshole, but I just fuck. I can't believe we did this. You're regretting it, aren't you? I hung up without answering because I didn't want to admit that I was. Not because of Mark, but because I'd used Adam as a weapon. I'd slept with someone not because I wanted him, but because I wanted to hurt someone else. That's a different kind of ugly. The next week was brutal. Mark's friends started messaging me, calling me every name you can imagine. His sister blocked me on all social media. His mother called me crying, begging to know why I'd do something so cruel to her son. I couldn't explain without telling them what Mark had said, what he'd done, and honestly his emotional abuse felt too nebulous to defend myself with. He read my journal, sounded petty next to she slept with his brother. I was losing the narrative war spectacularly. Adam and I tried to talk a few times, but the guilt was eating him alive. His family was torn apart. Mark wasn't speaking to him, their parents were caught in the middle. He blamed me for initiating, I blamed him for not stopping me, and eventually we just stopped talking altogether. I told myself I didn't care. Mark had deserved it. He treated me like garbage and I'd given him a taste of real pain. That was justice, right? Except it didn't feel like justice. It felt hollow and sick. Then, 3 weeks after the breakup, Mark disappeared. He didn't show up to work on a Monday, didn't answer his phone. His apartment was empty, his car was gone, and nobody had any idea where he'd gone. At first, everyone assumed he just needed space, maybe took a spontaneous trip. But days turned into a week, then 2, and there was no contact, no paper trail, nothing. His family was frantic. The police got involved, but there was no evidence of foul play. Mark was an adult who'd left of his own volition. His bank account showed one large withdrawal the day before he vanished, and then nothing. His phone was off. He'd simply evaporated. And somehow, in the collective grief and panic, I became the villain of the story. Mark's sister posted on Facebook about how her brother had been destroyed by betrayal and was now missing. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. The comments section filled with people speculating that I'd driven him to suicide, that my cruelty had pushed him over the edge, that if anything happened to him, his blood was on my hands. Adam called me devastated. They're saying this is our fault, that we broke him. That's insane. Mark's not some fragile victim. He's a grown man who made his own choices. He's also missing Taylor, and the last major thing that happened to him was us. The guilt I'd been suppressing came roaring back, mixed with genuine fear. What if something had happened to Mark? What if my revenge had actually driven him to hurt himself? I'd wanted him to feel pain, but not that kind. Never that kind. I gave a statement to the police, told them about the breakup and the circumstances. The detective's expression when I explained about sleeping with Adam told me everything I needed to know about how this looked. I wasn't a suspect exactly, but I was definitely the person everyone would blame if this turned into a tragedy. Social media became a nightmare. Someone found my Instagram and flooded the comments with accusations. My design clients started dropping off. Who wants to work with someone at the center of a scandal? My landlord gave me a nervous look when I ran into him, like he was worried I was going to bring drama to the building. I became the girl who slept with her boyfriend's brother and drove him to disappear. That was my identity now. The worst part was not knowing. If Mark was dead, I could grieve and process and eventually move forward. If he was alive and just hiding out somewhere, I could be angry at him for the manipulation of it all. But this limbo, this not knowing, kept me trapped in a cycle of guilt and defensiveness. 3 months in, I finally broke down and went back to therapy. My therapist asked me the question I'd been avoiding. Do you genuinely believe you're responsible for Mark's disappearance? I don't know, maybe indirectly. Let me rephrase. Do you believe that sleeping with Adam was the sole cause of whatever choices Mark made after that? No, but it was a factor. Was it the only betrayal in your relationship? And that's when I started crying, really crying, because I'd been so focused on my guilt that I'd forgotten about my anger. Mark had violated my privacy, dismissed my career, used me as a convenience, and humiliated me publicly. But none of that mattered in the court of public opinion because my revenge was more dramatic, more visible, more cinematically cruel. I wanted to hurt him, I admitted. That's why I slept with Adam, not because I wanted Adam, but because I wanted Mark to feel what I'd been feeling. And how do you feel about that now? Like I became exactly what he accused me of being. Dramatic, unstable. The problem? My therapist leaned forward. Taylor, you can own your part in this without accepting responsibility for another adult's choices. Yes, sleeping with Adam was hurtful and arguably cruel, but Mark's response to that, whatever it was, is his responsibility, not yours. Intellectually, I knew she was right. Emotionally, I was drowning in the weight of everyone's blame. 4 months after Mark disappeared, his credit card pinged at a gas station in Nevada. He was alive. Not hurt, not kidnapped, not dead in a ditch somewhere. Just alive and apparently living under the radar somewhere out west. His family was relieved and furious in equal measure. His mother called everyone who'd been involved in the search. The detective closed the case. And slowly the story shifted from missing man to man who abandoned his family. But here's what nobody talked about. Mark had let everyone think he might be dead for 4 months. He'd watched his family suffer, watched the search efforts, the Facebook posts, the genuine terror that something awful had happened to him. And he'd done nothing. Said nothing, just let them all twist in the wind because he was punishing them, punishing me specifically, but taking everyone else down as collateral damage. The cruelty of it was staggering. When I heard he was alive, my first emotion was relief. My second was rage. He let me believe I might have driven him to suicide. He'd weaponized everyone's grief and fear to make me into a monster. I called Adam for the first time in months. Did you hear? Yeah, his voice was hollow. He's alive and he let us all think otherwise. My mom's devastated. She's angry at him now, but also so relieved she can't process it. He did this on purpose, Adam, to punish us. I know, a long pause. We still shouldn't have done what we did. No, we shouldn't have, but this is worse. This is so much worse. After we hung up, I sat with the complexity of it all. 2 things were true. I had done something deliberately hurtful, and Mark had responded with something systematically cruel that hurt far more people than just me. Both things could be true simultaneously. But here's what kept me up at night. Mark's disappearance had almost worked. It had almost convinced me that I was the sole villain, that my revenge was the worst thing in our story. And part of me wondered if that had been his goal all along, not just to punish me, but to rewrite our entire history so that he was the victim and I was the abuser. The gaslighting continued even in his absence. When Mark finally resurfaced properly, 6 months after he'd vanished, he didn't apologize. He moved to Arizona, got a new job, and started fresh like nothing had happened. His family was fractured. His mother couldn't forgive him for the disappearing act. His sister was still convinced I was the real villain. Adam was caught in the middle trying to maintain relationships with everyone. And me? I was left picking up the pieces of a life that had been publicly destroyed. I lost clients. I lost friends who thought the whole situation was too messy to deal with. I lost my sense of self as someone who did the right thing, because I'd chosen revenge over integrity and it had cost me everything. But I also learned something crucial. I learned exactly who I was capable of becoming when I was hurt. I learned that I could be vindictive and calculating, that I could use people as weapons, that I could justify cruelty if I felt justified in my anger. That knowledge sits in me now, heavy and uncomfortable. I can't unknow it. Here's what I tell people now when they ask. Yes, I slept with Mark's brother as revenge. Yes, that was deliberately cruel. Yes, I own that completely. But Mark's response, the psychological warfare of his disappearance, the willingness to let everyone suffer to punish me, that revealed something about him too. We both showed our worst selves, just in different ways. Some people accept that nuance. Most don't. Most still see me as the girl who cheated with the brother, full stop. The story ends there for them. But the story doesn't end there for me. It continues in every relationship I'm afraid to fully invest in, every time I catch myself wanting revenge instead of resolution, every time I wonder if I'm fundamentally broken or just human. I'm in a new relationship now, with someone who has nothing to do with any of this. His name is James, and he's kind and straightforward, and sometimes I catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for him to reveal that he's been reading my journal, or that he thinks my work is just a hobby, or that I'm only convenient until something better comes along. He asked me about my last relationship on our 4th date, and I told him the truth. All of it. The invasion of privacy, the cruelty I endured, the revenge I chose, the disappearance, everything. I watched his face as I talked, waiting for judgment. That's heavy, he said finally. You went through something really toxic, and you responded in a way you're not proud of. Does that bother you, what I did? What bothers me is that you were in a situation that made you feel like revenge was your only power. That's the sad part. I cried in the restaurant bathroom after that because someone finally understood that you can acknowledge your mistakes without accepting the label of monster. But I still carry it all. The guilt, the anger, the knowledge that Mark is out there telling his version where he's the victim. The awareness that Adam's relationship with his family may never fully recover. The memory of who I became when I was pushed far enough. The reason I'm telling this story now, the reason I'm typing this all out after almost a year of silence is because Mark sent me an email last week. Just 3 lines. I hope you've learned from what you did. I've forgiven you, even though you don't deserve it. I'm praying for you. The manipulation of it, the positioning of himself as the bigger person, the rewriting of history, it sent me spiraling. Because he's still doing it. Still gaslighting, still controlling the narrative, still finding ways to make me question my own reality. So I'm putting my version out there, not because it makes me look good, it doesn't. Not because I think I was right, I wasn't. But because I need someone to understand that this story is more complicated than woman sleeps with boyfriend's brother for revenge. Yes, I did that. Yes, it was cruel. But I did it after months of systematic emotional abuse, after having my privacy violated, after being treated as disposable. I did it as the desperate act of someone who lost all sense of her own worth and was grabbing for any scrap of power she could find. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. In Mark's disappearance, that wasn't the act of a heartbroken victim. That was the calculated cruelty of someone punishing everyone around him for not playing their parts in his narrative. We're both guilty. We both chose harm, but only one of us is willing to admit it. So yeah, everyone says I deserve the guilt, the social exile, the permanent mark on my reputation. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is what I deserve for choosing revenge over walking away. But I also know what I don't deserve. I don't deserve to carry Mark's choices along with my own. I don't deserve to be gaslit into believing I'm responsible for his manipulation. And I don't deserve to forget that he violated my trust first, systematically and deliberately. I'm the girl who slept with her boyfriend's brother for revenge. That's true. That's mine to own. But I'm also the girl who survived a relationship designed to make me question my own reality. Who recognized abuse even when it came wrapped in nice dinners and expensive gifts. Who chose the wrong way to fight back, but who fought back nonetheless. And if that makes me a monster in everyone's eyes, at least I'm a monster who knows exactly what she did and why. That's more than Mark can say. The moral of this story, if there is one, isn't that revenge is wrong. It's that becoming like the person who hurt you is its own punishment, one that lasts long after the satisfaction fades. I know who I became that night with Adam. I know what I'm capable of when I'm wounded and angry, and I'll carry that knowledge forever, a weight that no amount of justification can lift. But I also know who Mark is, and that knowledge at least sets me free.